Good afternoon and welcome to the San Francisco Planning Commission regular meeting for Thursday, July 10, 2014. I'd like to remind members of the audience that the Commission does not tolerate any disruption or outbursts of any kind. Please silence any mobile devices that may sound during the hearing. And when speaking before the Commission, speak directly into the microphone, and if you care to, do state your name for the record. I'd like to take roll at this time. Commission President Wu. Here. Commissioner Antonini.
Present.
Commissioner Borden.
Here.
Commissioner Moore.
Here.
Commissioner Sugaya.
Here.
And Commission Vice President Fong and Commissioner Hillis are expected to be absent. Commissioners, first on your agenda is consideration of items proposed for continuance. Item 1, case number 2012-1025VX at 325 Fremont Street. A request for a downtown project authorization is proposed for continuance to July 17, 2014. Commissioners, you will consider the continuance for the downtown project authorization, and the acting ZA will consider the continuance for the variance. Item 2, an administrative and planning code amendment amending regulation of short-term residential rentals and establishing fees is proposed for continuance to August 7, 2014, although an indefinite continuance is printed on your calendar. Commissioners, further on your agenda, we received a request for continuance from Supervisor Campos for item 14, case number 2010-0043X at 490 South Van Ness Avenue, a request for large project authorization, which is proposed for continuance to September 11, 2014. The project sponsor is in agreement of the continuance but requests an earlier date. In addition, we received a request for continuance for item 15, case number 2012-1523AD at 151 to 153 Liberty Street, submitted by the DR requester and proposed for continuance to an unspecified future date. It is our understanding that the project sponsor is opposed to the continuance. Commissioners, you may take up the matter now, but I would suggest you take up the matter of the continuance when the item is called. And lastly, there is a request for continuance for items 16A, B, and C, case numbers 2014-0981D and 2012-0075DD at 437 Duncan Street. Discretionary reviews. Proposed for continuance by the project sponsor to July 24, 2014. Although there is a mandatory discretionary review, there is also an individual discretionary review, and it is our understanding that the DR requester is opposed to the continuance. Commissioners, again, you may take up the matter now or wait until the item is called. I believe the DR requester is present. And I do have speaker cards.
Okay, let's take public comment. Just to remind the public, your comments should be limited to the matter of the continuance alone. And if I call your name, you can line up on the screen side of the room. David Thompson, Russ Cohen, Kevin Crency, Marcia Westbott. Hold on one second. Let's make sure the mic is on.
I got it. Yeah. Okay.
Hello? Okay.
Thank you.
Hi. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Carolyn Goosen. I'm a legislative aide to Supervisor David Campos. And I just wanted to say that because of concerns from neighbors to the project, including Marshall Elementary School PTA and the Plaza 16th Coalition, Supervisor Campos has requested a continuance of item 14. The project sponsor has agreed to the continuance, the hearing today, and we're requesting a continuance to September 11th, 2014. While the project has been in the works since 2010, many community members feel they have not been made aware of the project and have numerous concerns. If the Planning Commission sees fit to hold this in September, we would be thankful. However, we are willing to compromise on the date and have it on August 14th, which is the date that the project sponsor has requested. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
I'm David Thompson, and I'm here regarding the Administrative and Planning Code amendment regarding short-term rentals. I'm a landlord who happens to have a tenant who can pay me rent only because he is able to sublet 2 rooms in the back of his
Sir,
flat.
excuse me if I could interrupt.
Yes.
We're speaking as to whether or not you want the item to be continued or not continued.
Oh, I don't particularly. I'm sorry. I thought it was to speak on the substance of
No,
it
we
because you
won't,
called
we
my
won't be
name.
hearing the item today.
It's not. Doesn't matter to me whether it's continued or not. So that takes care of it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, fine. Thank you. I was misinformed.
Go ahead. Other microphone, please.
Okay, thank you. My name is Marcia Weisbrod. My name was just called, but I'm also here to talk about home sharing, and I'm not sure this is the right order.
Okay, so there has been a request to continue item number 2, which is about short-term rentals, to the date of August 7th. And so the commission will vote on whether or not we should continue to that date. So public comment should be about whether or not you seek to, or you agree or desire to have the continuance.
Oh, well, obviously I'd rather speak now, but a continuance is fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there additional public comment?
Doug Engman on item number 2. Oh, I'm sorry, wrong mic. Doug Engman on item number 2. When can we expect the staff report on the short-term rental ordinance? Is it public now?
No. I mean,
Mr. Director?
it comes out typically a week before the commission hearing.
I see. So on a matter of such controversy, we're going to have a week to be able to respond to the staff recommendation?
Your comment should only be to the matter of continuance.
I don't have a
of
problem with the
items.
continuance, except it's, as we all know, very controversial in the city. We'd like to know what the planning department recommendation is going to be.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I believe staff can be available to answer your questions, but during public comment, it's not a back and forth. Next speaker, please.
President Wu, Commissioners, good afternoon. Philip Lesser speaking on the 490 South Van Ness continuance. That's case 2010.0043X. As you can see from the case number, this has been moving through the entitlements process since 2010. There's been an enormous amount of community outreach. We were very surprised learning on Monday that the supervisor wanted to have a continuance. We've agreed to August 14th. We understand that's a pretty heavy agenda for you. If you'd want to move it to August 7th, that also works for us. So our preference is August 14th, or August 7th, but if not, August 14th works for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name's Russ Cohn. I was just called. I want to speak in support of the continuance of home sharing, the home sharing topic. I think it's important that it gets discussed in a timely manner. I think it's important that the Planning Commission work with our Board of Supervisors in a timely manner to get this issue out in the open. I have rented a portion of my home, and I would like to do that again in the future. It's important to keep my family in the city. We recently had a baby. Costs are piling up. We need the little bit of extra income. We've enjoyed meeting people from other parts of the country, other parts of the world. And without this little bit of extra income, it's very difficult for us to stay in the city. And the Board of Supervisors has pending legislation, which I think handles a lot of the issues that have come up around safety, security, the character of communities, and I think it's important that the Planning Commission get behind that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. David Silverman, item 14, 490 South Van Ness. I just want to echo Phil Lesser's comments earlier, he's handled extensive public outreach over the past 4 years that this project was going through the planning process. And I also wanted to express our appreciation to Supervisor Campos and his staff for being flexible on the date and agreeing to an August date. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Kevlin here with Reuben Junius and Rose here on behalf of the project sponsors for 437 Duncan, which is item number 16 on your calendar. We're requesting a continuance today for several reasons. First, it's become clear to us earlier this week that there is some interest in providing some additional rendering and information regarding the front facade of the building. We don't have a rendering in our packet right now, so we'd like to take the time to prepare that for both the Commission and folks interested in the project. The second is, unfortunately, it became clear to me on Tuesday that we sent the mailing out for this hearing, but we did not post at the site. That was a complete oversight on my part, and I apologize for that, and we need to take care of that. So as a result, we're requesting that the Commission hearing be continued to July 24th, which is the soonest date that we can come back here because we need a 10-day notice. And so I'm here if you have any additional questions, and thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
President Wu and members of the Commission, good morning. I'm Ross Camp, 436 Duncan Street. I'm here in opposition of the continuance motion for 437 Duncan. We've had nearly 2 years to get ready for this hearing. This has been going on for approximately 2 years. Everything should be ready to go today. Many people from Noe Valley, approximately 20, have taken time off from work today. Many are not getting paid for their time here. Many have had to find childcare for their kids. For all of these reasons, we think that putting this on a future agenda is simply not optimal, and we would prefer to move forward today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is John Pilgrim, 438 Duncan Street. I am the DR requestor. I am in opposition to the continuance. We have over 17 members from the neighborhood here in opposition to the project proposal. We have canvassed the neighborhoods at least 7 or 8 blocks worth, handing out, I think, over 400 flyers and have an extensive email list that have announced this meeting. We have dozens of petitioners opposing the project. The project is very well known. Secondly, I have spent many hours, dozens of hours preparing renderings based on the project sponsor's plan set, including the most recent plan set that was submitted in the packet, that illustrates accurately what the substantive disagreement between the community and the project sponsors are regarding the presence of the penthouse on the top of the building and how it negatively impacts both the front view as well as the lateral views. Other details of the front facade are not in dispute between the neighborhood and the project sponsors, and I would very sincerely ask, since we have brought so many people here and taken that much time out of our days, that the matter be heard today. Thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, let me ask the director. It was stated that the posting was not properly posted, and so I believe there's a legal matter in front of us.
If indeed there was not, thank you, Commissioner, if there indeed was not a posting on site, then the Commission, and then it was not appropriately posted, and the Commission cannot conduct a public hearing today on the item. That is, it's part of the required posting that it be actually physically posted on the site.
Okay, and it's the project sponsor's responsibility to post on the site.
That's correct.
Okay. Do you have a question? Okay, so to the public, it sounds like we are legally unable to hear item 16 today. I think it's difficult. It's the project sponsor's responsibility to post on the site, but it's the DR requester who asked for the hearing. So that's where I see the legal problem. But
can I speak, please? May I? I'm sorry.
Okay, please, we'll continue public comment.
Thank you. My name's Georgia Shudish, and I'm really here about the mandatory DR. And I don't know if that makes a difference in terms of the public notification. But, I mean, everybody knew about it. The sign was up about the 311 report. I mean, we've all kind of talked about nothing else. I know there's a legal issue, but I'm not here about necessarily about the public DR. I'm here about the mandatory DR. And I don't know if that makes a difference. And with regard to any change in the facade, if it's just the facade, I don't see why we couldn't have gotten it earlier, or we could get it today, right now, before we'll be here for a couple hours. It wouldn't be made available to us. So thank you.
Okay, let's continue public comment, but please keep your comments to the matter of continuance. Next speaker, please.
Commissioners, I don't want to waste your time. This is about 437 Duncan. I understand there's a legal issue, but I have to say I'm one of the many people who left 3 children behind, had to arrange childcare, and the fact that the project sponsor didn't even post and is not adequately preparing their packets with the renderings in it. I don't know if you ping them later when we hear again, but it's really disappointing. My husband is the one who spent the time, and again, we're here in droves to voice our opposition, both to the continuance and to the project itself, and we just hope you can consider that at a later date.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Meredith Daney. I'm at 434 Duncan, so unfortunately on the same topic. I do have a point of clarification I wanted to ask in regards to an earlier comment made about the mandatory DR, I believe, which is in reference to the demolition permit, and is that actually covered by the continuance request today, or will that also be covered?
So we'll continue to take public comment, and then I think we'll discuss after public comment's closed.
Okay. Thank you.
My name is Christopher Baker. I live at 356 28th Street, and I'm speaking against the continuance on the Duncan Street project, item number 16. I also have 2 children at home and took a day off from work. Moreover, the project sponsors were at my front door less than 48 hours ago talking about this project with me face to face, and at no point was a potential change or an issue with posting any sort of documents brought up. There are 3 people there to talk to me about it, and so we'd like to proceed if possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Madam President, members of the Commission, members of the community. My name is Jim Lynch. I'm a resident of Duncan Street at 453 Duncan Street. I'm also a native of Noe Valley and have spent most of my life in Noe Valley, and I've also spent 31 years with the San Francisco Police Department, so I understand the legality issues. I'm just very concerned at the lack of outreach from the developer and the professional law firm that they've hired to outreach to the community. It's a travesty at this time in regards to the community's time and efforts they put forward to come here today, and then to find out that there was a technical lack of procedural followed by the sponsor, and it's just disconcerting. And again, I'd like to speak in opposition to the continuance. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Kevin Krejci. I'm a homeowner out in the Sunset District, here to speak in continuance for the home sharing discussions. I think they're very, very important to San Francisco, and I love this city. I'm a 30-year resident of the Sunset. I think it's a very big opportunity for San Francisco once again to be a leader in terms of innovating new ways of doing things that are more flexible. In our case, we have a guest room in our house we make available for guests like our in-laws who actually visit frequently, often 3 months at a time. The rest of the year, it's a waste to have an empty room, and I think it could help the housing crisis by giving lots of people new places to stay and bring their money to the city, whether they're short-term or long-term. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good morning. My name is John Jordan. I am a 55-year resident of the city of San Francisco, born and raised here, love this town. I am employed by this town. I've taken time off today to voice my disapproval of a continuance of this item. 2 years ago, we met in front of this said property and met with the developer, contractor, and a few others, and everyone that was present, all were in disagreement of the proposed project. We all, and now it seems like the communication is terrible. There is no, just like my neighbor Chris spoke, that was the first time I've seen them in 2 years, was 48 hours ago, asking, what was my position on this, and I said it hasn't changed in 2 years. So I hope that you will listen to our request and move forward with the hearing.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. I'm Laura Guzman, Director of the Mission Neighborhood Resource Center, also co-chair of the Local Homeless Coordinating Board, and I'm here to support the continuance on the matter of 490 South Van Ness. I want to also note for the record that as Director of the Resource Center, we are within about 300 feet of where the proposed site is, and we have received no notification. Neither has the Mission Neighborhood Health Center, which is our mother organization who has been on the corner of almost South Van Ness and 16th for 67 years. We're really concerned about the planning department, continue to support and voting on permitting when there is no appropriate consultation with the community. And they can say they have consulted the community that matters have not been consulted. In addition, I have spoken to the commission. I remember we met with John as a local homeless board member. I want to say we have at least 1,400 homeless people in the 16th Street area. We have hundreds of families who are homeless, and we need to first prioritize affordable housing before we can pass any other luxury housing or condo conversions or condos in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. As a reminder, please keep your comments to the matter of continuance. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Tommy Avicoli Mecca. I'm with the Housing Rights Committee. I'm speaking to the matter of 490 South Van Ness. We are in support of a continuance till September 11th. And the main reason being that Housing Rights Committee is located in the same block as this proposed project. We are probably within 300 feet or a little bit more than 300 feet from the site, and we were never, ever, ever notified. We knew nothing about the April 23rd community meeting that they supposedly held until yesterday. That's when we found it out at the April 23rd meeting. We have never been contacted or in any way involved in any community process around this project. I'm also part of the Plaza 16 coalition, which has come together around the 16th and Mission project, which I won't address because I know that's a different matter. But I'm part of that project. And yesterday at our meeting, we brought up the 490 project, and nobody in the room, and there's people in the room who represent various organizations within the Mission, nobody had been contacted by the developer about this project. And we're talking people who are really intimately involved in all kinds of things in the Mission, and they had never heard, as Laura Guzman said, we have not been contacted. The community in the Mission has not been involved in this project, has not been contacted, and we're very alarmed to hear that this project's going forward without any input from us. Certainly, it seems to me that they have an obligation to be talking to all of us, especially an organization like Housing Rights Committee, which is right down the street. They certainly should be talking to us at some point, as far as I understand. So I implore you to, a continuance is really in order. We need more time. All the groups involved with Plaza 16 Coalition, which will be opposing this project, all need more time in order to do what we do. And so we're asking you for a continuance till September 11th. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Kimberly Trey, and I'm also from the Housing Rights Committee. I support a continuance to the September 11th for the 490 South Van Ness. I walk by that place every day, and I just heard about it today about the thing. So I support the continuance until September 11th. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Frank Petrilli. I'm here on behalf of Jonathan Nelson, the DR requester for item 15. The DR request, by way of brief background, was filed The DR request was filed back in February. We were retained as counsel last month, and since then have been diligently working with the project sponsor to try and document an agreement that would obviate the need for Commission intervention. We received comments on a written agreement yesterday, and we understand that the project sponsor is opposed to a continuance, but nonetheless, we would request that the Commission exercise its discretion to continue the hearing for 2 weeks. Again, we are very close to a written settlement agreement that would, again, moot the need for the DR. We have agreed in principle to a number of items that would address our clients' concerns. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
President Wu,
Yes.
I did not hear which project this gentleman was talking about.
Project number 15, item number 15.
Thank you.
Liberty Street. Good afternoon. My name is Dan Kerrigan. I'm a resident of the Outer Richmond. I support continuance of item number 2 regarding short-term residential rentals. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jan Neufeld. I live near Dolores Park. I am here to speak about item number 2, and I favor continuance.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Brian Basinger, the director of the AIDS Housing Alliance of San Francisco. Forgive me if my voice is shaking a little bit, but the previous speaker is the serial evictor who kicked me out of my home that I lived in for 40% of my life. And this is the first time I've seen her. She took away so many things. I'm the last of 30 gay men left alive who all died in that home. We took care of them, and they were buried in the backyards. It was in my will that I was going to be buried with them to complete the circle. And this woman never even took occupancy of the home. She does that for a living. But I'm here to speak in support of the continuance. The community is being destroyed by people like Jan Neufeld and other speculators who are coming in and displacing long-term residents, people who built the community. They are vulture capitalists who are coming in and profiteering off of the good work and the heart and soul that we put into our communities. We need more time to properly organize and have conversations with these developers and try to come to some kind of peace. And dirty tricks and not obeying the rules and not giving proper notice and kicking people with AIDS out of their homes is disgusting, and it's not tolerable in this city, and we need your support to try to stem the tide of the displacement that's happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Sandra McPherson. I live in the Castro. I'm a fourth-generation San Franciscan. My son and I host guests in our home, and I'm here in favor of the continuance of item number 2. Thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon, board and members. I'm the project sponsor for 490 South Van Ness. We find it just appalling that we've been in the process since 2010. We've had 2 neighborhood notification meetings. We've sent out the 300-foot radius map, which I have here showing multiple, over 40 neighborhood groups that were notified of each meeting. These groups that showed up today, I don't know where they were in the past, but if they look at Socket Site, if they've been linked in with what's going on in the area, we've been getting some public notice, and we've a photograph here of our notice that's been on site for the last 30 days. We've worked extensively with planning, and regarding this site has been closed for over 5 years. There's nobody being displaced. This is a blighted site. It's not safe for kids and the neighborhood. We have vagrants, we have graffiti, we have a lot of vandalism in the area. We want to get this cleaned up. We're, as I said, it's been since 2010. We're hopefully you'll fit us in your August 14th hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Sharon Campbell. I'm a homeowner in West Portal. I am here in support of you working with the supervisors to work out a situation for home sharing. I've been in my home 17 years. I'm widowed. It's helped me in the last year continue to keep my home, and it has brought quite a bit of business into our great West Portal shops and restaurants. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there additional public comment? Okay, seeing none, public comment is closed. Commissioner Antonini.
Thank you. My thoughts on some of the requests. The first is item 2, which I've heard almost everyone in favor of the continuance to August 7th. I think that's an easy one to decide. On Duncan, item 16, do we have a decision whether noticing was in fact there or was not there?
It is my understanding, Commissioner, that the posted notice was not placed on the site. Just to clarify the process is that the department provides the project sponsor with the physical poster, and they are proposed to put it, and they are required to put it on site and then give us an affidavit that they do that. This apparently did not happen. We provided the poster, but it was not placed on site. And there was mailed notice per the requirement, but there was not posted notice physically on the site.
Well, that being the case, it seems to me that we could only regrettably have to continue this, and I think we're talking about the 24th being the earliest we could hear it.
Just to clarify, you do have the option of taking testimony on it without taking action if you wanted to do that.
And that might be a good suggestion to let the people who came talk about this but not make a decision. So that might be what I favor. On item 14, 490 South Van Ness, I was at the community meeting on the 23rd of April. It was very well attended. There were many people in support, few people who were opponents, but generally it seemed to be well presented, and it seems hard to believe that people in the neighborhood were not aware of this item because it's been around for 4 years. That being said, Supervisor Campos has granted those who question the project some more time to meet with the sponsors, and I think that's a fine idea, but I believe the project sponsor and the supervisor's office have a meeting scheduled for July 15th. So I don't see any reason why the continuance should be any longer than August 7th. If there is a problem with that date, it always can be continued to a later date, but if we can get this moving forward, then I think it would be. Yes, did you want to respond to?
I believe it was August 14th. That was the date.
Well, that was what but Mr. Lesser had preferred the 7th, and I was in favor of the 7th.
We hadn't talked about that date as far as I know.
Well,
I
don't know. I was thinking the 31st would be better. Mr. Lesser, can you comment on that? Yesterday when we spoke, we had heard that the supervisor's office had agreed to the 31st of July.
And then we found out that you're not actually meeting on the 31st of July, so we had to come up with another date. Mr. Ionin, is that correct? The 31st is
Yes, July 31st is canceled.
Canceled, so that's why we had to move into August, Commissioner Antonini. And we are willing to go to the 14th. We understand that's a very full agenda for you that day. Of course, our preference would be the 7th, but in respect to the supervisor, we would go for the 14th if that's what they would like.
Okay, so apparently everybody is in agreement when we go for the 14th on that one. Yes. Okay, sounds good. So that I would be in favor of that date. So we have a lot of other commissioners with comments. I want to make a motion, but I'll wait until the other supervisors have commented.
Commissioner Borden.
Yeah, I think obviously everyone's in agreement on item number 2. In terms of item 14, I think the 14th makes sense. Of course, I don't have to sit through it, so it doesn't matter for me, I guess. And then on the Liberty Street, no one talked about, but I wasn't really sure what happened. Maybe the planner can explain that to me. And then in terms of Duncan Street, just to make a note to the public, this commission there's 2 commissioners who are currently not here today, and actually 3. I'm actually going off this commission, and 2 other commissioners are absent. So if we were to take testimony again, you'd have a substantively different commission on whatever date that hearing is, and you would basically have to do everything. None of that could really factor into the deliberation because of the legal issue. I think it's reprehensible that the posting didn't happen, and obviously it calls into question a lot of things, but under the law, we could either make you stay until we get to item 16 and hear the testimony, knowing that basically you'd have to do this all over again whenever the date is continued to with a substantively different commission. So that would be the reason that it wouldn't be optimal to have the item heard today, and it's the last item on the agenda, so you'd have to sit through a whole bunch of other things. So I personally am very disappointed that that happened. I don't know why the posting didn't happen, but I would say that maybe the commission can take that under advisement when determining the new date for that hearing. But to the planner on item 15, what is the...
So the DR requester is asking for more time, but to my knowledge, the project sponsor hasn't agreed to the continuance.
Is the project sponsor present?
I don't think so. So it may be better to consider the continuance during when the item is called.
Okay, thanks.
And can I follow up on item number 16? There was an inquiry from the public around the mandatory discretionary review, but I assume the mandatory DR also requires the posting on site.
That's correct. So for this project, what the department did was we combined the notification for all three of the cases into one hearing. So the notification specified that the commission would consider today the mandatory discretionary review for both the demolition, new construction, and also the request for discretionary review for the new construction that was filed by the neighbor.
Okay, thank you. I would add to the concerns of Commissioner Borden about why the posting wasn't posted on site. I think that's very clear to the lawyers that are involved in this case that is always required. Commissioner Sugaya.
Yes, just to add to Commissioner Borden's comment on the composition of the commission, there are other commissioners here whose terms are already up, and it's quite conceivable that you may be seeing one or two, or maybe at least two commissioners may also not be here in the future. So to hear it now, I think, is very risky in terms of having the composition change over time. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that is another possibility to add what Commissioner Borden said. I think there are ones that are in agreement. I'm going to go ahead and move item 1 and 2 on the continuance calendar. Item, let's see. 14, South Van Ness to August 14th, I think was the agreed upon date. And did we have consensus? I mean,
on a date for 16?
I think the project sponsor wanted it to go to July 24th.
Wait, which one? No, not 16.
On Duncan Street.
So,
and then lastly, Liberty Street.
It's a call.
We did a call, yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's right. All right, so we'll leave that off.
Second.
So what was the date for the 16?
24.
24th.
Of Duncan.
Duncan.
Yeah.
Duncan, yeah.
And then again, the date for the Liberty Street?
To take it up at the call of the item.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And can we clarify for item number 2, the date of continuance would be to August 7th?
August 7th is what they're...
August 7th, it's short.
Yep. August 7th. For number 2, right?
Okay, so on that motion.
There's still commissioners that have questions.
Commissioner Antonini.
Yeah, a couple questions. I am supportive of the motion. Regrettably, I would like to allow the people here to comment on it, even though it will be taken up later, but it seems like the thoughts of the other commissioners are pretty much that, and it has to be continued one way or another for final action. I have a question on the 31st of July. It seems to me that that was a date that was added back on our calendar to replace last week, which we lost because of the 4th of July. The 5th of July was not heard.
Commissioner Antonini, you and I wanted that, but it didn't happen.
Oh, it didn't happen. I mean,
It didn't happen. That's correct.
maybe because we hoped it was happening. So,
Right. Wishful
okay,
thinking.
so that's good to know.
Just to clarify, the calendar that you approved did cancel that the 5th Thursday this month.
Okay.
I want to make a note to the public. I think that the comments that Commissioner Borden and Sugaya made are correct, that you may see a different composition of a commission here. It may or may not be worth going through all of your public comment on item number 16 on Duncan Street today, but there is a public comment portion at the end of the hearing, and so I feel for the members of the public that have come out here and arranged for childcare and to miss work, and so you do have an opportunity to speak generally at the end of the calendar, which is item H. I'm sorry, public comment's closed. Commissioner Borden.
On the motion, the notion was to move item 16 to the 24th of July, and maybe I could ask a representative of the DR if that's a good date, because since you all rearranged your schedule to be here, it just seems like we should make sure it's a date that you can accommodate.
Thank you. And I would like to ask everybody who is here and to speak out on behalf of that project to please stand, just so you'll know how many of the audience were actually here in support of talking today with respect to the DR. Thank you. So so it looks like the 24th is going to be a good date for us. So thank you for asking about that. We would like to basically express our profound disappointment that the system broke down. And it sounds like that on behalf of the project sponsors that they really dropped the ball. I don't know what kind of checks and balances are in place, but this is a terrible imposition on us. We will make it work because we are completely devoted to maintaining and preserving the character of our community, which we feel like is a bit in jeopardy. So we will be here on the 24th, but again, we're very upset about what's happened today. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, please call the question.
On that motion to continue item 1 to July 17, item 2 to August 7th, item 14 to August 14th, and item 16 to July 24th, Commissioner Antonini?
Aye.
Commissioner Borden?
Aye.
Commissioner Moore?
Aye.
Commissioner Sugaya?
Aye.
Commissioner Wu?
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 5-0. That places you on the consent calendar. All matters listed here under constitute a consent calendar and are considered to be routine by the Planning Commission and may be acted upon by a single roll call vote of the Commission. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a member of the Commission, the public, or staff so requests, in which event the matter shall be removed from the consent calendar and considered as a separate item at this or a future hearing. Item 3 at 3004 Terraville Street, a request for conditional use authorization. Item 4 at 623-629 Dolores Street, a request for a condominium conversion subdivision.
Is there any public comment on items 3 and 4? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Commissioner Antonini.
Move to approve items 3 and 4.
Second.
On that motion to approve items 3 and 4, Commissioner Antonini?
Aye.
Commissioner Borden?
Aye.
Commissioner Moore? Oops, sorry. Commissioner Sugaya?
Aye.
Commissioner Wu?
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously. Commissioners, that will place you under Commission Matters. Item 5. Consideration of adoption of draft minutes for June 19, 2014 and June 26, 2014.
Is there any public comment on the minutes? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Commissioner Antonini.
Move to approve the minutes of June 19th and June 26th.
Second.
On that motion to adopt the minutes for June 19, 2014 and June 26, 2014, Commissioner Antonini?
Aye.
Commissioner Borden?
Aye.
Commissioner Moore?
Aye.
Commissioner Sugaya?
Aye.
Commissioner Wu?
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 5-0. And places you on item 6, Commission comments and questions.
I want to say a quick note to Commissioner Borden. Today is her last hearing at the Planning Commission. She will be moving to the MTA Board of Directors. I wish we could say she can't leave, but that's not a reality. I want to thank you for your service. Thank you for all of your thoughtfulness and always being fair on this commission. Commissioner Antonini.
Yes, I will miss Commissioner Borden, of course, as we all will. Jonas, did you have those pictures to put a couple of those up on the screen just for a second there? Oftentimes when you come back from a vacation, even if it's just week off, they kind of ask, what did you do on your vacation, at least when you're in school. But I just wanted to share my project with you, and I think it's going to come up on the screen. Basically, I put in a brick walkway with the help of a friend of mine for my wife in our front yard, and it made me really appreciate what our laboring men and women go through, because this work is really physically demanding and precise, and it took 4 10-hour days of work for us to get this in there. And the other thing that's significant in terms of planning issues is we made a lot of runs to the Home Depot in Colma. We tried some of the local hardware stores, and they were very helpful with suggestions, but you know, things like crushed granite or leveling sand or certain types of mortar or sort of items you're probably going to buy from sand and gravel wholesalers or from some place as big as Home Depot. So it's regrettable, unfortunately, that it sounds like there's not going to be a Home Depot in San Francisco, at least not in the near future, but there is a place for these type of organizations, especially when you're working on a semi-holiday week. But anyway, it was a fun project and very satisfying, and we also had a lot of painter's tape to block those bricks off, so when we put the mortar in, it didn't stain the bricks. So that was part of what you're seeing there. But anyway, that's what I did while we were away.
Commissioner Borden.
Well, as everyone said, this is my last commission meeting as a planning commissioner. Next week I will be sworn into the Municipal Transit Agency's Board of Directors, and I'm excited about the new challenge there. I've served 6 wonderful years, and I've been so honored to have been of service on this commission, and I've really enjoyed the opportunity to work with each of you. I was just laughing at Commissioner Antonini's comments and thinking that how I don't know what it'll be like to be on the commission where I don't have someone who provides commentary on such a broad range of topics. Sorry. No, but I've learned so much from each of you. Commissioner Moore has taught me so much about architecture. I have no background in architecture, and I have learned quite a bit from Commissioner Moore and her observations, and the same with Commissioner Sagaya and his expertise in historic preservation, a topic I hadn't thought a whole lot about, quite frankly, until my service with Commissioner Sagaya. I think Commissioner Antonini always has very thoughtful comments on every project and everyone else's comments, so that's always been quite a pleasure. But Commissioner Antonini is very thoughtful and always, you know, he'll meet with any person who wants to meet with him, just so you all know. He's very generous with his time and his support of this commission. And Commissioner Wu, who has been absolutely stellar, has such a great mind, and she always just cuts through the noise and kind of asks the right questions and kind of, doesn't indulge as in the verbose dialogue that the rest of us tend to do at times. So I want to thank you all. I mean, working with Planning Director Ram, I'm really sad to not have that opportunity to work more closely, but we'll look forward to working closely still in the new role, as well as all of staff, Kevin and Jonas and Aaron and just so many other, and Christina and all these other staff people. The Planning Department is a wonderful agency. I've really grown in my respect for the department and the quality work that it does, and how much that you all have to deal with, both from us and members of the public, and trying to make interpretations of the code and all the rest. And so I really respect the professionals that everyone is in this department. And I look forward to being part of the MTA, where, we've spent 6 years planning neighborhood plans and coming up with a vision for the city that runs with a great transportation infrastructure to match all of the development that we envision. And so the challenge, of course, will be making sure that our transportation infrastructure actually can deliver on the promise of transit-oriented development and actually move people around, and so that the city of the future will be a city that can accommodate more people, but not necessarily all the cars, and be a safe place for people to walk or bike as well. So thank you for your service, your friendship and your collegiality, and thank you to the members of the public who've educated me on so many things over the years.
Thank you. Commissioner Sagaya.
Yeah, we'll miss you, Commissioner Borden, in more ways than one. But now we know who to direct our transportation questions to, especially bicycles.
Better watch out.
Anyway, congratulations and good luck over there. I have a couple things. One, I think we have a new commission, not secretary, but assistant secretary. I'm not quite sure what the title is, but welcome. This is your first meeting, yes? So. And Jonas can keep sitting over there. Let's see. I don't really read Willie Brown on Sundays, but I did notice in his column, this is directed to staff, that he mentioned that the Academy of Art University is in the process of purchasing, I think, the Concordia Club on Van Ness and Post, I believe it is, which raises issues, again, of the AAU continuing to purchase properties in the face of, well, I won't go there, but we all know what the problem is. Secondly, that the Board of Supervisors, I think, took the correct stance on 2 Henry Adams in denying or actually they didn't take up a vote on the landmark status, but just tabled it, I guess. And I think that the debate about using historic preservation incentives to convert PDR spaces to offices really needs a lot of airing, I think, in the city, given the potential for loss, especially south of Market. And that comes from someone who's been in historic preservation for like 40 years now. And I applauded the efforts on the part of the city and other communities around the country to include incentives for preserving historic resources in their communities. But because there really weren't very many incentives available to owners and tenants. But I think sometimes there are larger issues that need to be addressed. And so I hope we can have an extended conversation about this, especially with the Historic Preservation Commission.
Commissioner Moore.
Thank you, Commissioner Borden. Her experience goes far beyond the 6 years that we have been sitting here together. It's shining through all the time that there is a political astuteness about larger matters and what's in front of this commission, which shines through. I learned a lot in addition to your incredibly positive spirit. When I look across the room, there's always a fabulous smile, and so any frustration basically evaporates looking at you and hearing you with the broadness of your responses. Thanks for your sensitivity. Thanks for everything I learned from you, and I look to continuing friendship as you move on, and I wish you best moving from theory to practice.
If there's nothing further, Commissioners, we can move on to department matters. Item 7, Director's announcements.
Thank you, Christine, and welcome to Christine, who's the Commission Jonas's backup. I forgive me for not remembering your actual title, but this is Christine's first meeting managing the Commission meeting today, and I believe you will be here and again next week when Jonas will be on a vacation. So we all will give Christine our support in the coming weeks. With Commissioner Sagaya's question about the AAU's acquisition of the Concordia Club, the zoning administrator has been made aware that we are informing them of the issue, and whether the issue will be, of course, whether it is actually used for institutional purposes. We are looking into that and looking into potential delays in violation of the current notice of violation as well. Lastly, I just wanted to, on behalf of the department, thank Commissioner Borden for her 6 years of service. It's been great. I will miss your energy. I will miss your insight. I'll miss your support of the department. But you will be seeing us in your new role. We are getting much more involved in transportation issues. We will be at the MTA board, and we will certainly interact in the coming months and years. So congratulations.
Commissioners, item 8, review of past events at the Board of Supervisors. And there were no hearings for the Board of Appeals or Historic Preservation Commission yesterday.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Aaron Starr, Planning Department staff. This report covers both the week of June 30th, July 14th, and July 7th to July 11th. The first item at the Land Use Committee on June 30th was a resolution of intent to establish the Trans-Bay Transit Center Community Facilities District. The proposed legislation includes the two resolutions and supporting documents. Planning staff presented the details of the proposed Community Facilities District consistent with the adopted Transit Center District Plan. Transit Joint Powers Authority staff presented the funding program for Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the Trans-Bay Transit Center project. Committee members asked a number of questions primarily regarding the funding of the Trans-Bay Transit Center project. Supervisor Scott Wieners expressed concern that the CFD funds would be used towards Phase 1, the terminal construction and rooftop park, and that would leave less funding for Phase 2, which is the downtown rail extension. Ken Rich from OEWD stated the mayor's commitment to completing the rooftop park concurrent with the opening of the terminal. Supervisor Wiener gave staff a letter his office had received from Rubin and Junius representing unspecified developers and property owners, which raised a number of concerns regarding the special tax rate and method of appointment. The city is developing a response to these concerns. There was one public comment in support, Jim Haas. The item was forwarded to the board with recommendation. Also at that land use hearing was the general plan amendment and planning code amendment for the Schlag Lock development. These two items are intended to implement the Visitation Valley Schlag Lock plan that was previously under the jurisdiction of the Redevelopment Agency. This ordinance came to the Planning Commission on May 8th of this year, which unanimously recommended approval. The planning at the Land Use Committee, Supervisor Kim had some questions about how the department chose the various land uses in the proposed SUD, and all of the committee members had questions about housing, cost, and affordability. Also, some of the members of the public, primarily representing local unions, questioned the development agreement. At the end of the testimony, the committee sent the ordinance to the full board with a positive recommendation. At the July 7th land use hearing, we had the interim controls for formula retail uses in the Castro Neighborhood Commercial District introduced by Supervisor Wiener. The resolution imposes interim zoning controls for an 18-month period in the Castro Neighborhood Commercial District to require conditional use authorization by the Planning Commission for a proposed use that has been determined to be a formula retail, even if the project sponsor subsequently removes one or more distinguishing formula use features from the project proposal. Since this item is imposing interim controls, it was not required to be reviewed by this commission. This item received very little comment and was forwarded to the board with a positive recommendation. Also on the agenda for land use was the designation of 2 Henry Adams Street. On March 5th, 2014, the HPC adopted a resolution recommending landmark designation to the Board of Supervisors. Supervisor Malia Cohen signed on as the project sponsor, and the item was heard at the Land Use Committee on June 16th, 2014, and then continued to July 7th. Public comment and supervisors' questions of the project sponsor focused on the impact of the incentives to convert landmark PDR buildings to office use, the resultant impact on existing commercial tenants, and the impact on the availability of PDR spaces in nearby PDR buildings were designated as landmarks. As Commissioner Segaya mentioned, Supervisor Cohen moved to table the landmark designation to the call of the chair. Also on the docket for this week's Land Use Committee was the interim zoning controls related to the 2 Henry Adams designation. It would impose interim zoning controls requiring conditional use authorization for office conversion in landmark buildings in PDR 1D and PDR G districts for an 18-month period. Again, this item received very little comment and was forwarded to the board with a recommendation. The Board of Supervisors canceled their meeting last week, but this week they heard several items. The first one was the second read of the Mission Alcoholic Beverage Special Use District, which passed. The next item related to the recreation and open space element. The Commission approved the adoption of the ROSE on April 3rd with a vote of 4-2. The Land Use Committee forwarded the ROSE to the full board without any recommendation on June 16th. The controversy behind Policy 4.2 drove the no recommendation from the Land Use Committee. The concerns presented at the committee as well as the Commission hearing in April were regarded regarding specific actions that the city might take to preserve some natural areas, such as removing eucalyptus trees and limiting access to natural areas. Staff clarified in their presentation that this policy only calls for a coordinated management effort, while detailing actions of such management plans would be deliberated through an extensive outreach process. At the board hearing, Supervisor Weiner also expressed concern about this policy. Specifically, the language that states the Planning Commission may require a development on a site that would be identified as a natural area to preserve the important portions of such area if found feasible and consistent with the Planning Code. Director Wren clarified that the Planning Commission would not be able to take away any development rights of such property, and any requirements regarding preservation of natural areas has to remain consistent with the Planning Code. Supervisor Weiner, Yee, and Campos ultimately voted no on this item, and the ROSE update was passed at the board after 7 years of community process on the first read with an 8-3 vote. Next on the agenda was the fee elimination ordinance that was sponsored by the mayor. This eliminates 4 planning code fees. The ordinance was heard by this commission on May 8th of this year, which you recommended approval unanimously. The Budget and Finance Committee heard this item on June 20th and also recommended approval. The ordinance passed on its first read. The other item was the dwelling unit density bonus for affordable housing. That was sponsored by Supervisor Weiner and signed on by Cohen and Kim. The committee heard Supervisor Weiner's legislation that adjusted density calculations and exempts affordable units from density limits when projects have 20% or more affordable units on site. The commission heard this item on June 12th and unanimously recommended that the board adopt the proposed ordinance. This ordinance passed its first read at the board this week. The general plan and planning code amendments for Visitation Valley were continued, I believe, to next week, as was the Trans-Bay Center Community Facilities District, and that was continued to July 15th. We had 2 introductions. The first one amends the police and planning codes regulating mechanical amusement devices and arcades, also known as Tommy's Law. Anyone? No? Okay. It was sponsored by Breed and Weiner. The ordinance reduces restrictions on the location of and lessens permitting requirements for mechanical amusement devices and arcades, so pinball machines and, okay, never mind. It also removes obsolete code provisions and amendments. The planning code, and it would amend the planning code to prevent arcades in the Haight Neighborhood Commercial District. And the other introduction was a planning code amendment amending the definition of a residential unit and residential conversion requirements. This ordinance amends the planning code to amend the definition of residential unit and clarifies the requirements for residential conversion of a residential hotel unit regulated under Administrative Code Chapter 41, and this will come to you for review. And that concludes my comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Can I ask, on interim controls, when they're passed, is there any provision for grandfathering? How does it interact with the pipeline of what's coming forward?
Like all planning code amendments and things, once it becomes legal, everything that hasn't already received its entitlement is subject to that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Antonini.
Yeah, a couple of questions. For the future, we would be interested in hearing about funding sources for Phase 2, the extension of the rail line to the Trans-Bay Terminal, because I think it's an important issue, and it would be good to have some kind of a report in the future on that item. And then the other thing, we had a discussion a little bit about the difference between an item we're going to hear later today or legislation that allows legitimization of existing office unit uses in what was previously industrial areas. And then the other item, allow conversion office if they're helping to create a historic building, make it more able to be legally through seismic or other means to make it. So I think I understand the distinction between the two. And in the case of number 2, Henry Adams, it's not an existing office use, so it wouldn't fall under what we're doing in eastern neighborhoods to allow legalization of office uses.
Correct. I'm not
Understand.
clear on the specifics of that law, but 2 Henry Adams is not currently an office use and would be converted to office.
It sounds to me like the one we're going to consider an example of the other use later on today, but I think it has to be an office use that's been in place in a building that is currently zoned industrial and legitimizing that use, and of course assigning it the square footage towards the annual limit. Perhaps Director Ram could clarify that.
I don't believe it's on the calendar today, Commissioner, but maybe I'm sorry, item 13. Yeah, that is a legitimization, which is different. It's not a conversion. It's a use that already existed as office, right, but didn't get the correct permits at the time that it went into place. The 2 Henry Adams issue is existing PDR space, and the conversion, the designation of that building as a landmark would have allowed it to be converted to office. So it's a different situation.
Got it. Thank you.
Commissioners, that places you on item 9, case number 2013-0029X at 222 2nd Street, an informational presentation, public art and design update.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Kevin Guy with planning staff. I'm going to keep my comments fairly brief. Again, this is an informational item regarding 222 2nd and the progress on 2 specific points. First of all, the public art proposal, as well as a update on some of the refinements to the exterior design that have been made post-entitlement through the building permit process. So just to recap, in August of 2010, this commission granted approvals for the project, which is a 26-story office building with almost 431,000 square feet of office space, as well as ground floor retail and an interior public open space. The item was reapproved in February of 2013 with some minor revisions to the development footprint of the site, as well as the configuration of some of the uses. The project is currently under construction. So in terms of the public art proposal, the sponsor proposes to fulfill the requirements of Section 429 dealing with public art by providing 3 artworks on site. Specifically, the sponsor would acquire and install 3 works by Frank Stella. These pieces would be installed in the Howard Street facing wall of the interior public open space. Given the scale of these particular pieces, even during the hours when that public open space is closed, evening and weekend hours, the pieces should still be quite visible from the public right-of-way. And also with respect to the design, I'll let the project sponsor come up and go into a little bit more detail, but there have been some refinements made to the exterior materiality. If you recall, the project is, the basic design language is a series of overlapping glass shingles. And the Commission did express some desire to see a stronger differentiation between the podium and tower portions and its relationship to kind of adjacent lower-scaled historic buildings, as well as the project sponsor will also describe some kind of refined treatments to the shingles themselves to make that design language pop a little bit more. So unless there's any questions for me, the project sponsor will go into a little bit more detail on these. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Carl Shannon with Tishman Speyer, and I'm joined by Peter Weingarten of Gensler. We are thrilled to be here and glad to be here for Commissioner Borden's last hearing. This project we've been working on since 2006, so we're very pleased to see this become a reality. Jerry Speyer of Tishman Speyer has a long-term relationship with Frank Stella and has known him for a long time. And we are thrilled to be able to bring 3 fairly important Stella pieces to San Francisco and display them permanently in the public open space of this building. Why don't we go to the art itself? This is the first piece. Why don't we just step through them? The second piece and the third piece, and then we have some renderings to show it in context. This is the public open space. These are the walls in the back, and then I think the strongest way to show it is this shows the public open space with the pieces hung on the wall. We would expect this to be open during the day and the public to be in it. We also expect that this could be the sort of space that would be used by people in the evenings and weekends for receptions and other sorts of things of that nature. It's really not part of the presentation today, but we also are pleased to tell you that LinkedIn, the social networking company from Mountain View, has leased the entire building. And I think this is part of a continuing trend of seeing technology companies wanting to be in San Francisco, to be close to the employment base that wants to live here. Peter and I are available to answer any questions, but we are thrilled to see this project come to reality. We're thrilled to bring the 3 Frank Stella pieces to San Francisco, and the building is under construction and hopefully will be done next June. And LinkedIn is already busy scrambling, trying to get their tenant improvements ready so that they can get the people into the building. So thank you, and we're available for questions.
Thank you. We'll take public comment first. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Commissioner Moore.
I just wanted to thank Tishman Speyer for bringing 3 outstanding pieces from a well-known artist into this lobby. This is very unusual. Mostly we have more experimental close things. I like the juxtaposition between local art and major pieces, which makes, I think, wandering through the downtown office buildings and looking at their lobbies, from digital art in one of the buildings at Fremont and Mission to this one, a much more animated and interesting experience. So thank you.
Commissioner Sugaya.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a quick comment. There wasn't a presentation on the refinements to the facade elements, but we have them here in our packet. I'd just like to acknowledge that I think the refinements are something that has improved the quality of the building and the visual aspects. So.
Commissioner Antonini.
Yeah, I'd like to add, I think the refinements are very well done, and also all the different things that have been done in the process of the entitlement and development of this building. And I think it's going to be very attractive, and especially the public open space there that is, very inviting, and it's a very important location in San Francisco and sort of at the epicenter of the development south of Market. So really happy to see that building going up quickly and looking forward to seeing it finished, and very happy to see it's completely leased.
Thank you for the presentation today. There's a Stella room at the planning department at MIT where I spent many hours, unfortunately. So it'll be great to see a different space in San Francisco with his art. Commissioner Sugaya.
I have a quick question. In terms of LinkedIn, does that mean that they're moving their headquarters up here with that amount of square footage, or is it just curious?
I can't speak for the company. There has been no announcement in that regard.
Thank you.
Commissioner Moore.
There is one comment I like to make. Seeing LinkedIn moving into a contemporary high-rise office building, I think, is an indication that there are indeed space needs which tech companies can also meet in well-designed high-rise buildings, rather than only looking for changes in use in what is primarily industrial buildings. So I think we're adding an example here which I think is worth noting.
Thank you.
Commissioners, that will place us on general public comment, not to exceed 15 minutes. At this time, members of the public may address the Commission on items of interest to the public that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission, except agenda items. With respect to agenda items, your opportunity to address the Commission will be afforded when the item is reached in the meeting. Each member of the public may address the Commission for up to 3 minutes. I have no speaker cards.
Is there any general public comment?
Hello, Commissioners. This is a very general comment. My name is Joel Koppel with the San Francisco electrical construction industry. I haven't been to one of these hearings in about 3.5 years. There's been some leadership changes within our industry, which brings me back here. So about 6 years ago, I started the business development department which works for the San Francisco Electrical Contractors Association and the IBEW Local 6 electrical workers. We're also very close with the DBI, Electrical Inspectors Division, San Francisco Fire Department, and it's really great for me to hear us still talking about projects I was closely involved with, like the Academy of Art and just everything in general. I left that position after 2 years, went to work for a subcontractor for 2 years in the office, and then actually went back in the field for about a year and a half. I was working at General Hospital for Rosendin Electric, so ironic once again that I helped that project in particular get through the processes through Department of Public Health, planning, and the board, and I got to go actually physically work on that project and build it. But the announcement I'm actually here to make is that there's been there's been a recent election which has a new business manager / financial secretary for IBEW Local 6 Electrical Workers Union. His name's John Doherty, and as of today, he takes office along with myself and his other representatives. And we just wanted to formally introduce ourselves as new leadership and look forward to working together with the planning department, all the supervisors, and the community groups to build a better San Francisco and help incorporate city residents and what's best for the city in general into the construction industry as a whole. Thanks.
Thank you. Additional public comment? Seeing none, general public comment is closed.
Commissioners, that will place us on the regular calendar. Item 10, case number 2014-0434T, an application information on anti-discrimination housing policies for consideration of a proposed ordinance.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Diego Sanchez with Planning Department staff. Today I'll be presenting on an proposed ordinance, planning case 2014-0434T, regarding amendments to the Planning Department application intake procedures for the purposes of collecting information on anti-discriminatory housing policies. However, before I begin my presentation, I'd like to provide Carolyn Goosen of Supervisor David Campos' office with time to present to you on the matter.
Thank you. Again, good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Carolyn Goosen. I'm representing Supervisor David Campos today. He's in back-to-back committee meetings and unfortunately couldn't be here. The legislation before you today, introduced by Supervisor Campos and co-sponsored by Supervisors Wiener, Kim, Farrell, Marr, and Avalos, seeks to address the issue of housing discrimination against people in the LGBT community. Our community continues to face prejudice and sometimes outright hostility from landlords, real estate agents, and lenders when looking for housing in many parts of the country. Disturbingly, 1 in 5 transgender people have been refused housing in the U.S., and more than 1 in 10 have been evicted because of their gender identity. Yet the National Fair Housing Act still does not include protections based on sexual orientation and gender identity. And the majority of states in this country also still do not have laws that protect our community from discrimination. We in San Francisco and in California do benefit from strong housing laws, but as our community members get displaced out of the city and some out of the state, during this housing crisis and affordability crisis, it is more urgent than ever that our community is protected, especially in states where these laws don't exist. So this legislation, as Diego will outline shortly, requires companies with out-of-state properties who are applying to build 10 units or more in San Francisco to indicate whether they have a policy prohibiting discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity in the jurisdictions in which they operate. If they do have one, they will be asked to provide a copy of that policy to the city. The Human Rights Commission will compile this information and provide it to the Board of Supervisors annually. This legislation will help inform us whether developers hoping to build in San Francisco are protecting LGBT housing rights when they own or develop housing in states where legal protections don't exist. By collecting this information, we are hoping to highlight best practices and better inform those who currently may not have these policies. We strongly believe that many developers and owners want to do the right thing, but need to be asked. In the past several months, we've investigated ways to make our original ordinance stronger and more impactful. The amendments that Diego Sanchez will present shortly were developed in close collaboration with the Planning Department, the City Attorney, and housing advocates. And we are very pleased and thankful that we have come up with an ordinance that has the support of the Planning Department. And I would like to really give a huge thank you to Diego Sanchez, Anne-Marie Rogers, and Director John Ram for their input and collaboration throughout this entire process. It has been a real pleasure for me to work with everyone. Rosemary Bosquet, DBI, has also contributed greatly, as well as John Malamet, the City Attorney, working on this, and Teresa Sparks of the Human Rights Commission. And I'd just like to acknowledge the many organizations who helped us craft the ordinance and who have been really very excited nationally for this ordinance to take place in San Francisco, including the National Fair Housing Alliance, the National Housing Law Project, the AIDS Legal Referral Panel, the National Center for Lesbian Rights, and AIDS Housing Alliance. And a special thank you to Brian Basinger, who has been working closely with our office from the very beginning on the legislation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Commissioners, as mentioned, this proposed ordinance would amend the Planning Department application intake procedures to require the Planning Department to collect an application from project sponsors or applicants proposing projects of 10 dwelling units or more. The application would request information about whether a sponsor and applicant or their subsidiary engages in real estate development, owning properties, or selling or leasing units. It would ask if they do, in what states or jurisdictions. If they do they have a policy either at a national or state level prohibiting discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity? And if a policy does exist, we would ask for a copy of that. The Planning Department would not consider an entitlement or building permit application complete until such application was collected. However, the Planning Department or the Planning Commission would not consider the responses on the application in any decision to approve or deny such a project. As mentioned, that the Planning Department would, on an annual basis, collect these applications and send them to the Human Rights Commission. Human Rights Commission would then prepare a report for consideration of the Board of Supervisors. Commissioner's staff is in support of the proposed ordinance for the following reasons. One, it represents a minor procedural change. This process of collecting an application and transmitting it to a sister agency is already being done right now with the First Source hiring program. We don't estimate that this is going to add any undue burden to anybody involved. There's also jurisdictional issues. We believe that the Planning Department and the Planning Commission will exclusively consider when reviewing a project, the general plan, the planning code, and related relevant design guidelines and whether to approve or deny a project. We're in support of this because we believe the information collection and entitlement will help inform the Human Rights Commission. And we've also considered a number of other alternatives that are listed in the case report, including for certificate of occupancy, periodic inspections from DBI or Department of Building Inspection during planning code enforcement cases and during required business registration. We found that these alternatives had some shortcomings, for example, the data collection happening later than preferred, or it being collected at irregular intervals, or there being a potential for the creation of a barrier to registration. In light of these shortcomings, staff believes that application collection at entitlement is the preferred alternative given the intentions of the ordinance. This concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's open it up for public comment. Jamie Huling DeLay, Tom Temprano, Tommy Evicoli Mecca, Brian Basinger, and Laura Guzman.
Hello, my name is Jamie Huling DeLay. I am a staff attorney at the National Center for Lesbian Rights, and I'm here on behalf of the National Center for Lesbian Rights to support this ordinance. We'd like to thank Supervisor David Campos for his support of the ordinance and his leadership in the ordinance, as well as the commissioners today for hearing it. NCLR submitted a letter in support of this policy that's in your executive summary packets that we would welcome you to read. We're very proud to be standing with our allies in the LGBT community here in San Francisco and various service providers in support of this proposal. The proposal makes clear that housing discrimination against LGBT people exists nationwide and can and must be eradicated. The housing crisis in San Francisco has hit the LGBT community particularly hard. More than 1 in 5 people who are positive with HIV have been displaced from San Francisco in the last 5 years. And when LGBT people are displaced from San Francisco and from their homes, they not only lose their personal support communities, the ability to live in San Francisco and be in a civil rights bastion, but they're often forced to seek new housing and relocate entirely outside of California to one of the 29 states in which housing discrimination against people on the basis of their sexual orientation continues to be legal, or one of 34 states in which it's legal to discriminate in housing on the basis of gender identity. There's no current protection nationwide for LGBT people in seeking housing, and this is an opportunity when San Francisco can send an important message and make clear that this issue is a priority not only to San Francisco but also nationwide. This ordinance will make project sponsors think about where there are gaps in protections for tenants and buyers and realize that they, as project sponsors, are empowered to address them. Often, just asking a question can raise awareness about it. When someone who works for a project sponsor is required to pull their anti-discrimination policies, they may realize that they don't have a national anti-discrimination policy, or they don't have policies in states where the law doesn't require them, and be moved to take corrective action. This ordinance has the possibility to be a model for the nation and help change the nationwide conversation about the need for federal and state housing protections for LGBT folks. San Francisco has consistently been on the vanguard of these issues, and we feel that this is an opportunity for San Francisco to once again lead the way. At NCLR, we are aware of housing discrimination and how pervasive it is against members of our community. We have a national helpline that we operate, and we routinely get calls from around the country and even around the world about issues that many of us in San Francisco assume no longer happen, but unfortunately they do. Thank you.
Hello again. Tommy Avicoli Mecca from the Housing Rights Committee. I'm also a longtime queer activist. I've been involved in the LGBT community for the last 44 years. I came out when I was a 19-year-old back in 1970. So I've seen a lot of changes. I think that this proposal is very reasonable and certainly would send a message to the rest of the country. Would also serve to just once again tell the world that we are a city that really does care about human rights, really does care about eliminating discrimination in all aspects of the community. I think developers need to be aware that if you come to San Francisco, you have to have a non-discrimination policy, and that's a non-discrimination policy that is across the board and covers all the categories, including LGBT folks, gender identity, sexual orientation. I think it's a great precedent. I think it's a great thing, a great message to send out there to the world. I think it's long overdue, and I think we should just do it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi. I'm Brian Basinger, Director of the AIDS Housing Alliance in San Francisco. In 1995, I co-founded the Freedom Mary Task Force of Northern California, and was lucky enough to work for Lambda Legal Defense as the public information officer for the Hawaii gay marriage trial and others. In 1997, we passed the Equal Benefits Ordinance, which aimed to require employers doing business with the city of San Francisco to provide equal benefits to same-sex couples as they provide to opposite-sex couples. The component that required that did not pass legal muster. So there was no legal requirement for employers outside of San Francisco to provide equal benefits to their employers. But you know what happened? They did it anyway. Just by asking the question. I think most people are good, and they just need to be asked. And this will have that same impact. We will be able to go to these developers who are coming to our city and wanting to, they're making a good amount of money, so they really want to be here. And so let's use that attraction that we have in the city right now to have them go back to the rest of their organization and say, hey, what do we think? Where do we stand?
on protecting people based on sexual orientation and gender identity. And I believe in my heart that the majority of people will say, oh, you know what? We never thought about it. We were never asked. And they will change their policies. And then what will happen is the exact same thing that happens with marriage equality. We got marriage equality because somebody asked. And San Francisco asked in 1997, do you treat people equally? And what will happen is these developers, like the developer on 15th Street in the Castro from South Carolina, who said that their folks would never, ever protect transgender people, have now said, you know what, actually we will, just by asking. And we will get all of these places in the country, like my home state of Texas, and we will get the billion-dollar corporations there out in front and saying, do you know what? Protecting LGBT people from housing discrimination is the right thing to do. And then we'll be able to go to Congress and say, hey, do you know what? Actually, these corporations, these billion-dollar corporations in your jurisdictions are actually already with us, and we will give them the political cover to get protections for sexual orientation and gender identity in our national fair housing policies. And it'll start here today, and you guys have an opportunity to do that. And I think that what a wonderful thing on your last day to be able to be a part of. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Laura Guzman, Director of the Mission Neighborhood Resource Center, co-chair of the Local Homeless Coordinating Board for San Francisco. I think this ordinance is critical. What we've seen in our last homeless count of 2013 is that 30% of our homeless population is LGBTQ. We also see a great incidence of homelessness among younger adults and transgender people. It is critical that we continue to protect our LGBT community. I have 20 years working in the city, and I started working on HIV/AIDS with homeless HIV/AIDS positive people that we have housed 20 years ago. This city was a mecca for people with HIV. Now we have 1 out of 5 homeless again. We cannot let the city of San Francisco that happen. So I really think that this ordinance will add to the protections that the city already has. And again, we should continue to role model, and we should protect community who's been here for 20 and 30 years and have made the character of the city so important. Thank you for supporting this ordinance.
Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. Tom Temprano, co-president of the Harvey Milk LGBT Democratic Club, here to ask you to support the LGBTQ Equal Housing Ordinance. As other speakers have discussed, San Francisco has a well-deserved reputation as a national leader on policy proposals. Leaders like Harvey Milk and others fostered a culture of innovation that has led many to say, as goes San Francisco, so goes the nation. In no area is that statement truer than with the advances in LGBT rights that have occurred nationwide that were born here in San Francisco. From domestic partnerships to the rainbow flag itself, what happens in San Francisco spreads across the country. The LGBTQ Equal Housing Ordinance gives us an opportunity to again share San Francisco's commitment to LGBT non-discrimination with the rest of the nation. By asking several simple questions of companies who are building in our city, we can encourage the equal treatment of LGBT people that LGBT people in San Francisco take for granted to be extended to people across the country who need those protections desperately. I encourage you all to take this opportunity to allow San Francisco to continue its national leadership on LGBT issues and to support the LGBTQ Equal Housing Ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Melaine Ahern. I'm here from the San Francisco Human Rights Commission. Teresa Sparks, the Executive Director of the Human Rights Commission, did submit a letter for your consideration in the packet that I believe is before you today, and I just wanted to introduce myself to the Commission and echo the sentiments stated in Director Sparks' letter of July 2nd. The Human Rights Commission is the city agency responsible for enforcing the city's ordinances against discrimination. And last year, about 20% of our housing discrimination complaints were filed on the basis of sexual orientation and or gender identity. As some of the previous speakers have stated, there are no federal protections against this form of discrimination. And the Human Rights Commission does view this ordinance as something that would potentially have a very positive impact on the LGBT communities throughout San Francisco and throughout the United States. And the simple data collection measure would provide for a key point of information that's currently missing from the national discourse. So the data collection would not be onerous for the Planning Department or Commission, and the Human Rights Commission would find that measure to be a simple form of reporting to the Board of Supervisors, to the Commission, for consideration and assessment of how our policies and procedures could have a benefit to the national discussion on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there additional public comment? Okay, seeing none, public comment is closed.
Commissioners, may I make one clarification? One thing I forgot to mention is that the ordinance would be living in the administrative code and not in the planning code.
Oh, okay. Thank you to the members of the public who came out to speak. Very happy to support today. Happy for San Francisco to be in a leadership position for the nation. Commissioner Moore.
Happy to support, happy to see San Francisco in leadership position, echoing President Wu's comments. The fact that prejudice, hostility, and discrimination are unfortunately and are alive and stronger than I thought was evident during Gay Pride. In detail, there were responses about incidences which are quite shocking and quite disturbing. They actually make a chill go down my spine. And it is in light of that that I become kind of alarmingly aware that we do not have housing protection for LGBT. We don't pay that much attention to that detail. And I think it is not only overdue, it is part of basic right as far as I see it. And for San Francisco to take the lead for the obvious is something I strongly support and move to approve.
Commissioner Borden.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's a no-brainer. As a former board member of Equality California, I can't more enthusiastically support this measure. And having worked for a large corporation and seeing in real time the implementation of Equal Benefits Ordinance and how it's pushed corporations across the country to adopt policies in this area and change the way that they treat their employees is just powerful. So I'm happy that we can be part of leading that.
Commissioner Antonini.
I'm also very supportive, and I think the discussion mentioned it's positioned at a very good place at the beginning of an approval process, because those developers coming before us who want to build, would need to have this as part of their company's policies. And it's a lot more effective to do it because there's something that they want and they need this in return. It's more difficult when you've got an existing situation but you don't have anything that you're giving them. And the other thing that was brought up here is the national impact, because many of the companies that build in San Francisco are national companies, and so as members of the public pointed out, this could very well create a policy in these national companies that doesn't currently exist. So I think it could have a big impact. So, of course, in favor.
Commissioner Sugai.
Yes, I'm echoing my fellow commissioners up here in complete support, but I'd like to have some a little clarification, which may, for benefit of the public. There was a gentleman who testified who said that he was glad that the company or developer would have to have a policy before they were allowed to develop. I don't think that's the case, and this ordinance doesn't address that. I think I'm correct since I hear and I see heads are nodding. Staff, I think, can clarify that, right?
Diego Sanchez with staff, you're correct, Commissioner.
So if I were a developer and I were making more than 10 units as an example, and I have a permit application that I have into the department, I'm asked these questions, I could basically answer no to all of them and still go ahead with development, I think. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Just so that people don't get the wrong idea here. This only happens at the time a permit application is filed. So, for example, if I were a developer again, and I filed and I had a policy in place and that was submitted to the department, I got my entitlements, built the building, and then I flipped it. The subsequent developer, subsequent owner wouldn't have to provide this information to the department. Is that right?
That information would be required to be provided prior to for certificate of occupancy under how the legislation's written right now.
Right, but if that was all, but I sold the development, let's say a year later, the new owner isn't required to provide this information.
As the legislation is written right now, that's correct.
All right. I don't know if that's something to take into consideration, because you hear all the time now that buildings are being flipped. And so maybe the supervisor's office can take a look at that.
Thank you. Commissioner Moore.
Mr. Sanchez, isn't it stronger being part of the administrative code rather than just buried in the planning code? I hear it more as a broad policy statement, which when somebody reads the administrative code, it ripples through all kinds of things.
We believe it's much stronger in the admin code. We believe that it fits much better there than in the planning code for a number of different reasons.
Commissioners, there is a motion and a second to adopt a recommendation for approval with alternatives. Commissioner Antonini?
Aye.
Commissioner Borden?
Aye.
Commissioner Moore?
Aye.
Commissioner Sugaya?
Aye.
Commissioner Wu?
Aye.
So moved. That item is approved unanimously 5-0. Commissioners, that will place us on item 11, the 2013 Downtown Plan Monitoring Report, an informational presentation.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Paolo Ikezoe, and today I'm going to present just a few highlights from the 2013 Downtown Plan Monitoring Report. So if we could put... So as I just mentioned, this is the annual update, which gathers data from a variety of different sources pertaining mostly to the downtown C3 district, which is the red area on this map here. In some sections, we zoom out a little bit and take into kind of a larger geography, which we call the greater downtown, which is the red plus the white on this map. And next year, we'll be preparing a full 5-year report, which goes into a little bit more detail and in which we'll do a little bit more analysis of sort of trends and patterns for the downtown. So as you can see, hopefully, around 2/3 of the city's office space, this is about just over 72 million square feet, are downtown, along with about 60% of the city's hotel rooms and about 16% of retail space. Office and retail vacancy rates are down, both citywide and in the downtown, and hotel occupancy is up a few percentage points this year to 83%. Average office rents downtown are up to $54 per square foot, which is an increase of about 5% since last year. And hotel rates are up almost 22% to $214 per room per night. In terms of employment, you'll see that the number of jobs last year increased across all sectors, both downtown and citywide. I should add that these numbers are from the first quarter of 2013, which is for consistency with our previous updates. But the latest numbers that we have from the state indicate that we have over 620,000 jobs in the city, which I believe is an all-time high for employment. And then our collections for business, property, sales, and hotel taxes are also up this year. So looking towards the future, see we have about 3.7 million square feet of office space in the development pipeline for downtown. That's about a third of the citywide office pipeline. The other two major locations, just for your reference, are for office space are in Candlestick Point and at Mission Bay. On the residential side, we have almost 9,000 units of housing in the pipeline. That's for the greater downtown, so that's sort of the red and white on this map. And I should note that that's the largest amount of planned housing in any area of the city that's not part of a large master plan development like Treasure Island or Candlestick. The downtown plan sets some pretty ambitious goals, transportation-related goals. We monitor transit ridership, resident and worker commute patterns, and average vehicle occupancy. This year we've added some information on the regional transit providers, and as you can see, transit ridership is up across the board, but especially at the stations and portions of those systems that serve downtown. Just over half of downtown workers use transit to get to work, and about a third of downtown residents take transit. And one of the goals of the downtown plan is that 30% or fewer of downtown workers drive to work. And as far as those who drive alone, we can see that we are meeting that goal with only 27% of downtown workers driving alone to their jobs. And while vehicle occupancy is declining, we believe that is really part of a larger nationwide trend where workers seem to be increasingly taking transit and walking and biking and carpooling less. And finally, the downtown plan recommends that sufficient and appropriate housing should be built to serve workers in new commercial development downtown, and that downtown should improve the public realm by providing new public open spaces. And so last year, we produced just under 2,000 units of housing citywide, significant increase from the previous year. And roughly a quarter of those units were located downtown. With commercial development rebounding as well, we've counted one new privately owned public open space at the latest Foundry Square building at Howard and First. And lastly, as development continues to come back, our jobs, housing linkage, and transit impact development fee collections have increased dramatically as well. As always, this report is available on our Planning Department website, and we've also published the raw data tables both on our website and at datasf.org. With that, I'm happy to take any comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll take public comment first. So is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Commissioner Sugaya.
Just a quick clarification on the transportation slide under the modal split between C3, listing C3 workers and listing C3 residents.
Right.
You're just using two different years, right? One is 2010 and one is 2012.
Right. So information for how employees get to work based on their location of work is only available every 10 years from the census.
Okay.
And for residents, for place of residence, it's available every year through the ACS. So for residents, we have more up-to-date information.
Okay. And then just a last question, the hotel tax zoomed by 68%?
Yes, that's correct.
That's a combination of increased prices and occupancy, I assume. Right.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
Commissioner Antonini.
Yeah, very good report, and I also saw I think it was in the Business Times, it had the figures that the state had released, and you mentioned 620 plus thousand jobs currently in San Francisco, and they also released the number of San Franciscans who were employed, and I don't have that figure handy, but I believe it was somewhere in the 400,000s, 420,000 or something like that. But assuming that we still have a split out of about 50% of the people who work in San Francisco who don't reside in San Francisco, that would leave you with about 310,000 San Francisco residents also working in San Francisco. So I think you start to get an indication of how many of our workforce are working outside of San Francisco. And so that's a really good figure to explore, because we heard about LinkedIn earlier having a huge presence now in San Francisco. And I think as we dig down and find out where are these people working who are residents and are not working in San Francisco is the kind of businesses we want to target to locate here and to address, cut down on the number of San Franciscans who have to commute to their jobs. So I think that may not be within the downtown plan scope, but I think it's a subject that's worth looking at. And the other question I have, or the question I have is, I know the downtown is technically the area indicated in red, the C3. Right. Then you have the other area that is in the white zone. And I assume your figures well, some show the entire area and some of the figures show just the C3.
Right.
But, you know, we should probably be looking at this in reference to what has been occurring in the last decade, where the center of business activity seems to be moving south of Market, and the vast majority of the new commercial building space is occurring in those areas. So it may be time to sort of go more towards the broader definition than the narrower definition of what our downtown area is.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good point, and actually that's why we sort of changed these geographies a little bit this year, with that in mind, with the idea that both residential and major residential and commercial are sort of moving south, thanks to policies that we've passed.
Thank you.
On that point, if I might, Commissioner, part of the value of doing it within the C3 is to compare year over year, since the original downtown plan was only for the C3. So there is a value in that, but there also is a value given the change in the geography of downtown, if you will, to try to compare. So I think it's valuable for us to actually do both, to compare it year over year in the original C3 where the plan was adopted, as well as the larger downtown area. And I just wanted to thank Paolo for his work on this and the presentation. Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Commissioners, that places us on item 12, 1503 Sloat Boulevard, a request for conditional use authorization.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon, President Wu and Commissioners. Marcel Boudreau with Department staff. The case before you is a request for conditional use authorization to establish a Formula Retail paint supply store doing business as Sherwin-Williams in an approximately 3,400 square foot tenant space within the Lakeshore Plaza Shopping Center. The vacant space was most currently occupied by Blockbuster Video. The project would not introduce a net new Formula Retail use at the shopping center. The proposed project would include interior tenant improvements, a minor storefront improvement, and new signage. However, no enlargements are proposed. The proposed establishment is a Formula Retail use with more than 3,900 locations in the United States. Lakeshore Plaza is zoned NCS, which requires conditional use authorization for Formula Retail uses. The shopping center itself is anchored by Lucky Supermarket and includes many other national retailers. Staff has found the project meets code requirements, is in keeping with general plan, and the project is on balance necessary and desirable. The department recommends approval. That concludes my presentation, and I am available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Project sponsor?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Melinda Sarjapur with Rubin, Junius, and Rose. I'm here on behalf of Sherwin-Williams. We're very excited to be here today to introduce this project. I have with me Gary Garcia, who's the District Manager for Sherwin-Williams, and Hope Kearney, who's here on behalf of Lakeshore Plaza Shopping Center. So if you have any questions for them, they're here as well. As you probably know, Sherwin-Williams is a retailer of high-quality paints, coatings, finishes, and supplies, and they have a reputation as a leader in the industry worldwide. As Marcel mentioned, Lakeshore Plaza is a neighborhood-serving shopping center that has been successfully operating at this location for more than 20 years. It's anchored by Lucky Supermarket and also has a number of other national retailers. We feel Sherwin-Williams would be an ideal addition for this center and an appropriate use for the area. Just a couple of quick points. They would be the only store in the center that's offering paints, coatings, and supplies. In fact, the next closest retailer that offers paints in a much smaller selection is more than a quarter mile away in another district. As a result, they're going to be able to offer nearby residents in the surrounding neighborhoods access to a range of products that would not otherwise be available in this area. Also, they won't be displacing any existing retailers from the center itself, as the space they'll be occupying is vacant, and won't be adding a net addition of Formula Retail, as they'll be occupying a space that was most recently filled with a Blockbuster video store. As part of this project, as Marcel mentioned, we're going to have some minor tenant improvements and installation of signage that would be consistent with the center and the district, but there will be no expansion of the area of the existing store. We're also anticipating that Sherwin-Williams is going to initially hire 5 new employees for this location, 2 of which will be managerial positions. So for these reasons, we feel Sherwin-Williams is going to provide a desirable new use for the center and the neighborhood and meet all of the findings required under the code for a new Formula Retail at this location. At this time, I'd like to ask Gary Garcia, who's the district manager for Sherwin-Williams, to come up and just speak briefly about the company and their interest in this location. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Just a little bit about Sherwin-Williams. We're an American corporation, and we were founded in 1866. And our sole mission is the manufacturing and distribution of paint and paint-related items. The focus of the store at Lakeshore will primarily be the sale of our architectural paint products to the DIY or homeowner and a professional painting contractor. We're interested in coming to the area in San Francisco because there are no full-service paint stores in the neighborhood, and we feel that we will add value to the neighborhood. We also provide a full line of zero VOC products that meet the most stringent regulatory requirements. Finally, we also always get involved in the communities that we live in and work in. In the past several months, we've donated our time and our resources to organizations such as the Boys and Girls Club, Playworks Education, Rebuilding Together, and Make-A-Wish Foundation. And for the last several years, we have donated 500 gallons a year to the Delancey Street Foundation here in San Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you.
All of our comments, but we're available for any questions you have.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Commissioner Moore.
Only one quick comment. The Commission has always been supportive of Formula Retail moving in previously Formula Retail use spaces. They are of a specific kind, of a specific size, and mostly in locations, particularly when they're part of a center, that are conducive to continuing this kind of occupancy. Move to approve.
Second.
Commissioner Antonini.
Yeah, I'm also supportive, and, for someone who occasionally does some painting, it's really nice to have a good paint company at a place where you can actually get parking and you can go in and get your supplies without having to circle around the block many times to find a place to park the truck or the car. So this is going to be very handy.
Commissioners, there is a motion and a second before you to approve with conditions. On that motion, Commissioner Antonini.
Aye.
Commissioner Borden.
Aye.
Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
Commissioner Sugaya.
Aye.
Commission President Wu.
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously, 5-0. Commissioners, that places us on item 13, case number 2013-0992B at 3130 20th Street, a request for office development authorization.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Brittany Bendix of Planning Department staff. You have before you a request to allocate approximately 32,081 gross square feet of office space through an office development authorization at 3130 20th Street and within an urban mixed-use zoning district. The subject site is located in San Francisco's Mission neighborhood and has frontage on Alabama, Harrison, and 20th Streets. The 41,600 square foot lot is developed with a 3-story building of approximately 55,414 square feet and a private off-street parking lot. At present, the building contains PDR uses on the ground floor and a combination of PDR institutional and office uses on the second and third stories. On February 10, 2014, the zoning administrator issued a letter of legitimization for 12,758 gross square feet of office space on the third floor. The proposal before you seeks to recognize that office space and to also designate approximately 18,274 gross square feet of principally permitted office space on the second story and 1,049 gross square feet on the ground floor to account for the shared common area. The combination of both floors exceeds the 25,000 square foot threshold and thereby requires the office development authorization. The total request of 32,081 gross square feet represents 2.5% of the 1.27 million square feet of small cap office space that is available for projects that include between 25,000 and 50,000 square feet of office. Since the publication of the case report, the department has received 2 letters in support of the project that I will pass out to you now. The department recommends approval of the proposal with standard conditions on the basis that the project is consistent with the intent of the zoning district, which is to encourage a mix of uses and principally permits office use. The project represents an allocation of approximately 2.5% of small cap office space. The office space conversion will retain existing employment opportunities and will help stabilize economic activities within the neighborhood. The project retains existing PDR space on the third story and ground floor of the building. At current rates, the project will produce approximately $626,000 in fees that will benefit the community and city, and because the project is consistent with the objective and policies of the general plan. This concludes my presentation, and I am available for further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Project sponsor.
Good afternoon, President Wu, members of the Commission, Greg Miller for the project sponsor. First of all, I just wanted to thank Commissioner Borden for her many years of service and hard work on this commission. We owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to you for that. We're here today to ask for an office allocation. We have received the final approval to legitimize a portion of the third floor of the property, and we are converting the second floor of the property under 803.9H, which you're allowed to do in the UMU zoning district. Because we're over 25,000 square feet, this can't just be done administratively. We need a 321 allocation from you, and that's what we're here to ask for today. I wanted to just make a couple of points extra clear. There's an existing PDR use on the third floor. That use is going to be retained. That space will always remain PDR, and the approvals reflect that. And as we deal with the approvals administratively after today, the floor plan will be clear about how that PDR space is located and allocated. And then secondly, there's existing PDR on the ground floor, and that, of course, isn't being affected at all by any of this. The ground floor isn't changing in any way, shape, or form. And I think the third point I wanted to make is we're not displacing anybody through this. This building, the upper floors of this building have basically been used for office for over 30 years. And those office uses have continued. We're now legalizing them through the 179.1 and the 803.9 process, and now the 321 allocation. So that's it from me. I am available for questions, and we have a representative from ownership here as well, Brad Koch, if you have questions for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll open it up for public comment. Is there any public comment on this item? Public comment is closed. Commissioner Sugaya.
Yes, I have a question for staff. So basically, one part of this, or the whole thing, I'm not quite sure, is to essentially approve about 7,000 square feet in excess of the 25,000 under that we have to take action on. Otherwise, they'd be able to continue with office space?
Correct.
Okay. And if I don't think the commission will do this, but if the motion is denied, they still retain the second floor office use, correct? And also,
right.
or do they? And can they retain? Can they retain all of the office space minus 7,000 square feet?
Correct. The third floor is pretty much completely done. It was a legitimization letter that's already gone through the appeal process. So the third floor would be set. Any reduction in the allocation would likely be pulled from the the second story.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Moore.
Could you give me the summary of space and office and summary of space and PDR? Just totals.
The ground floor is entirely PDR.
I'm looking at square footage. I couldn't do the math. Perhaps he could help you. Oh.
Commissioner Moore, the building overall is roughly about 55,000 square feet. We're asking for about 32,000 of office allocation.
That would leave 23
yeah.
and okay.
Some change. Thank you.
I think I like the combination of PDR and office because we are still looking for a prototype where office and PDR can mutually support each other, and while office, because of other factors, might carry a slightly higher rent, and I'm not talking about this project, but looking into the future, I'm very interested to support this, partially because we have been all along an Eastern neighbors been prepared for this. So I like that there is still a large component of active PDR on ground and third floor. There are many types of companies, particularly like SF Made, who are looking for third floor PDR uses, and I think this would be a great prototype to see of how it plays itself out in the future. So I'm in full support and move to approve.
Commissioner Antonini.
Yeah, I'm very supportive, and it looks like it's blended well, and we're really almost a legitimization of what is already the fact. And the zoning administrator felt that, the third floor was already taken care of under his auspices. But I think that we know that even firms that are completely PDR, like a lumber yard I visited recently, have an office component to it. It may not count as office, but they do have to have a significant part of it that involves the office functions of the PDR business. So, there probably are many uses that are very compatible with PDR, even if they're not the same company. So I am in support.
Commissioners, there is a motion and a second before you to approve with conditions. Commissioner Antonini?
Aye.
Commissioner Borden?
Aye.
Commissioner Moore?
Aye.
Commissioner Sugaya?
Aye.
Commission President Wu?
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously, 5-0. For the benefit of the public, item 14 for 490 South Van Ness has been continued to August 14, 2014. Commissioners, that will place us on the discretionary review calendar. Item 15, case number 2012-1523 AD at 151 to 153 Liberty Street, a request for discretionary review. Commissioners, as a reminder, there is a request for continuance from the DR requester for this item. You may take up the matter of continuance at this time.
So can we hear first from the DR requester on the request and then also from the project sponsor?
My name is Frank Petrilli. We're here on behalf of Jonathan Nelson, the DR requester. Mr. Nelson is the owner of the adjacent residence to the subject property at 159 Liberty Street, and the subject property is 151, 153 Liberty Street. So the DR request was filed back in February. We were retained last month to facilitate the DR requester in attempting to reach a resolution of the concerns he has regarding primarily the scope of the excavation work that is contemplated as part of the proposed project. To that end, there are really only two issues that I'd like to focus on. The first is in reviewing...
You were on the matter of continuance.
I apologize. I misunderstood. Same background is still useful, though. So the primary concern our client has to do with ensuring that the lateral and subjacent support of his property is handled in a way that is sufficiently protective. And to that end, we have requested from the project sponsor that temporary shoring plans be provided. That occurred last Friday. Over the weekend, our structural engineer, Ben Lai, had an opportunity to review them, and we have been working diligently to try and reach agreement on a set of parameters, including peer review and a pre-inspection survey. I mean, the typical types of items that you would expect in documenting a resolution of a shoring excavation type dispute. We provided the project sponsor with a draft agreement on Tuesday. They provided us with comments yesterday, and essentially our strong preference would be to reach resolution privately between the neighbors, avoid the need for commission intervention. We think we can do that realistically within the next couple weeks. We have reached an agreement in principle with the project sponsor on those 4 main points earlier. Naturally, there needs to be a little bit more back and forth, but again, our preference would be to enter an agreement, resolve it privately, and thereby withdraw the DR request.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Could I ask the project sponsor to respond as to whether or not you seek a continuance today?
John Duffy, project architect for 151 Liberty. The project sponsor would like the project to continue. We're not interested in a continuance at all. We'd like the Planning Commission to review the project and approve it in alignment with what the HPC previously approved. So we're not interested in a continuance today.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Antonini.
Yeah, I would like to hear it today. There are 5 issues that were brought up on the back, not to get into the case, but 2 of the issues, particularly the shoring and excavation issues, are generally issues that are handled the purview of DBI. So, that wouldn't really be before us. It would have to be something that would have to be worked out. If there's a private agreement, it's fine, but it will have to be in conformity with their standards. And then one of the others had to do with tenant displacement, which is not our purview either. So it seems like we could discuss the other 3, the massing, the lights, view, and privacy, and the roof deck, which are the 3 items that have been brought to our attention, and we could do that today just as well as in the future.
So seeing that there's no motion for continuance, why don't we go ahead with the item?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Rich Sucre, Department Staff. The item before you is a request for discretionary review for the building permit application associated with the project at 151 to 153 Liberty Street. The proposed project would include a change of use from 1 dwelling unit to 2 dwelling units, construction of a new garage and stairway, addition of a new residential entry on the primary facade, and construction of a new horizontal and vertical addition. Overall, the project would increase the square footage of the existing building from roughly 2,600 square feet to about 5,500 square feet. To date, the department has only received 1 phone call from an adjacent neighbor who has expressed opposition to the proposed project. The DR requesters have a number of issues with the proposed project, including excavation, massing, tenant displacement, lights, views, and privacy, and a roof deck. Since the subject property is located within the Liberty Hill Landmark District, the proposed project required review and approval by the Historic Preservation Commission. On December 4th, 2013, the HPC granted a C of A, a Certificate of Appropriateness, as noted in HPC Motion Number 0219. Since the proposal includes removal of the rear garden shed, the zoning administrator has determined that the prior rear yard variance, case number 87.602V, is no longer applicable and further review is not required. The department finds that the proposed project meets the standards of the residential design guidelines, the Liberty Hill Landmark District, and does not represent any exceptional or extraordinary circumstances. As there appears to be no exceptional or extraordinary circumstances, the department finds that the proposal is consistent with the planning code and recommends that the commission not take discretionary review and approve the project as proposed. I am available for any questions, and this concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, DR requester, your team has 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. Michael Donner, Stein and Lubin on behalf of the DR requester. Just as a recap, this is a planned project in the Liberty Hill Historic District. The DR requester, our client, resides next door in a historically registered Victorian home. There is to be excavation to the boundary line up to 18 to 22 feet. To make short work of this afternoon's hearing, we would like to streamline the objections of the DR down to 2 from what were previously identified. The first is that in 1988, planning recorded against the project property a notice of special restrictions. That notice was recorded in connection with permits for the construction of a shed, but the notice was not linked in any way to the shed. And it specifically states in the notice that in the event the envelope of the building is ever expanded in the future, there needs to be a variance issued and a public hearing surrounding that variance. Again, there is no linkage in the notice to the shed, even though it was recorded concurrently with the application for the shed. There hasn't been a variance, there hasn't been an application for one, there hasn't been a public hearing, and so that is the first ground. The second ground, I would like to turn over to my colleague Frank Petrilli, who will speak about the CEQA issues that pertain to the project.
Hi. So as I was saying earlier, our client's primary concern really is the potential for impacts of the excavation in terms of subsidence and settlement. And that really raises 2 issues. One, under CEQA, and 2, sort of the exceptional and extraordinary circumstance that we believe justifies discretionary review. On the CEQA front, the project was cleared through a categorical exemption, a Class 32 infill exemption in particular. And the certificate of determination stated that the proposed excavation would, quote, require shoring and underpinning of adjacent foundations, and concluded that there were, in addition, no unusual circumstances that would suggest a reasonable possibility of significant environmental impacts. As we've indicated, there has been no agreement between the neighbors on shoring and underpinning. No evidence in the record demonstrating that shoring and underpinning would be feasible or undertaken, or that major subsidence would not result. As my colleague, Mr. Donner, indicated, our client's home is I think over 100 years old. It is listed on the historic and the California and national registers, and the excavation is going to be significant. We're talking about anywhere between 14 and 20 feet. The numbers have shifted a little bit in terms of what the project sponsors represented. And I believe it's approximately 1,000 cubic yards of soil are going to be removed as well. So our position is that we believe, given the scope of excavation, the absence of any kind of agreement between the neighbors, that there is indeed a fair argument that the project could have significant environmental impacts due to subsidence. As I previously mentioned, we were also provided with temporary shoring plans on Friday as part of the sort of peer review process. Our engineer, Ben Lai, concluded that there were certain discrepancies in the calculations, certain inconsistencies between what was being proposed and what the project sponsor's geotechnical engineer had recommended, and other inadequacies in terms of the shoring details themselves. We did relay those comments to the project sponsor on Monday. They did agree that there were certain recommendations that they would be willing to incorporate. We have not seen revised plans yet, but we would look forward to it. And as I mentioned, I mean, our real preference would be to achieve resolution privately without the need for commission intervention. But if a continuance is not viable, then what we would request is that the commission consider imposing conditions of project approval that could ensure that the project's potentially significant impacts would be avoided. Conditions could, for example, entail preparation of a construction management plan, which could include details about shoring, underpinning if it's deemed necessary, and that those plans could then be set for approval at a public hearing to be attended by officials from both planning and DBI. We understand that the normal process, and taking Commissioner Antonini's point from earlier, is to handle it at the DPI stage. But since the Planning Commission is the final arbiter of building permits, we thought it appropriate given the... Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Project sponsor, you have 5 minutes. Oh, I'm sorry. Is there any public comment in support of the DR? Okay, seeing none, project sponsor, you have 5 minutes.
John Duffy, project architect. I'd like to just clarify a few items. Rich had mentioned the square footage. The actual habitable square footage is 4,900 square feet. A considerable amount is garage, admittedly, but it's not habitable. So moving on to the DR requester's comments, the removal of the shed was okayed. I know Rich checked this with the zoning administrator, and it is just an old wooden shed. It's not going to stick around. We're going to take it out. Regarding CEQA, we've gone through everything with environmental evaluation. There was never no underpinning proposed for the property. The shoring is going to be all on our side of the property line. A shoring design was provided. It is preliminary, but it was provided. And peer review was also provided, and the comments that were generated were incorporated into the design. The shoring agreement admittedly did not pan out thus far. It's just simply too onerous for the project sponsor. So just to talk a little bit about the project in general, we've been working on it for 2 years. We've had an approval from the HPC as with the project as it's currently designed. It was unanimous. There was no neighborhood opposition with the exception of Mr. Nelson. In terms of mediation and outreach, we've been working with Mr. Nelson. We've attended community boards meetings. The changes, however, that he suggested back then were so significant it would entail redesigning the whole entire project. So subsequently, we've been working diligently and in good faith with Mr. Nelson, attorneys on this shoring issue, shoring and excavation, specifically the shoring design, which has been provided, the peer review, which we've also allowed and incorporated the comments. However, the shoring agreement has not, at this point in time, has not worked out. So essentially, we've complied with all of Mr. Nelson's requests at this stage. Moving forward, we ask that the continuance request be denied. We've been at this for 18 months, and we've been always available for Mr. Nelson. We ask that the Commission approve the project as it's currently designed in alignment with the HPC approval. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Is there any public comment in support of the project sponsor? Okay, seeing none, public comment is closed. DR requester, you have a 2-minute rebuttal.
Going back to the principal issue for consideration, which deals with the lack of a variance, I did not hear a response from the project sponsor to that point in particular. There was an obtuse or glancing response to it that dealt with the shed but did not go directly at it. And to pinpoint the issue, the special notice was recorded against the property at or about the time that a shed was added, but it added to the property a special restriction that required any time there was an expansion of the building envelope to have a variance and a public hearing. Aside from the CEQA issues, which we believe can be dealt with through an informal agreement, I believe that the Commission should consider the issue of whether or not a variance is indeed required, as was the original indication in the recorded document. Thank you.
Thank you. Project sponsor, you have a 2-minute rebuttal.
As I said earlier, we've been on the project for close to 2 years now. We've gone through all the planning hurdles, if you will, including environmental, historic review, and the COA was issued. So I know that Rich has presented this material regarding, for instance, the shed and its restriction to the zoning administrator and gotten feedback. And with regard to CEQA, the environmental evaluation has been done in detail. So as far as the project sponsor is concerned, we've gone through all the hurdles and hoops, and we are convinced that the planning department has done their homework on the issue. So as far as we're concerned, we're in compliance. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, close the public hearing. Director Rim?
If I could, I believe, first of all, the issue of whether a variance is required is actually up to the zoning administrator, not the commission, as you know. And I just wanted to ask Mr. Sucre to clarify what you had said earlier about what the ZA said about that.
Correct. I did review the proposal with the zoning administrator, and since the variance is tied with the existing shed and they're removing the shed, the variance is no longer applicable, and so no further review is required.
Thank you. Commissioner Sugaya.
Yes, I was going to ask that same question, but in terms of the variant of that decision, can that be appealed to the Board of Appeals?
Presumably.
The decision to not require variance. I think I'd have to ask the city attorney that question. I don't. It's a non-decision, so is that appealable? And it's not.
No shed.
Well, no, it's the variance issue. The question is whether the ZA's decision not to require a variance is appealable.
So there's currently, just to provide some background, there's currently a variance from an NSR recorded from 1988 on the property that was associated with a rear yard shed, which now the current proposal is proposing to remove. In reviewing the project with the zoning administrator, he determined that the variance doesn't require additional review because they're removing the purpose of the original variance. So,
Commissioners, Kate Stacey from the City Attorney's Office. If there's a written determination from the zoning administrator, that's appealable to the Board of Appeals. If there's no written determination, and there's no variance decision here, there's not really anything that's appealable to the Board of Appeals.
Okay, I had another question, not a question, just a comment or observation. It was argued that perhaps the excavation work was so egregious that a fair argument could be made that CEQA could be triggered and it would have to go beyond a negative declaration. That too is not within the purview directly of the commission, and would Mr. Sucre, can you, if they wanted to challenge the neg deck, there's a procedure separate for that also.
Correct. So they were a Class 32 categorical exemption was published on the property. So it would follow the normal procedures for a Cat X.
Okay, thank you. And then lastly, there's another comment made with respect to the commission being the last word on building permits, and that I think is not correct either. It's the Board of Appeals that takes appeals from building permit for applications and appeals on those applications. So.
Thank you. Commissioner Antonini.
Yeah, I guess based upon what DR requester is saying, if there is a notice of special restriction that deals with, there has to be a public hearing to have a variance granted for removal of the shed. I'm just interpreting what I've heard. I'm not sure if that's necessarily true. But if that is, we're having a public hearing. It's not before the zoning administrator, but we are having a public hearing in regards to this issue.
But there's no longer a need for a variance because the original need for the variance is gone when they remove the shed.
The shed is no longer there.
The shed will be removed, therefore there's no need for a variance. The project meets the code.
Okay, so I mean the remove the shed is not part of this project. They've already removed it, or they're removing it as part of the project.
That's right.
They're removing it as part of the project, so therefore the notice of special restriction does not apply.
Correct.
That's correct.
motion? Oh, Commissioner Moore.
I think, looking at the project, I don't see anything exceptional or extraordinary, and since the adjoining house, the DR requester's house, is quite large itself, what we are looking at is an enlargement which adds a second unit, and does it in a skillful way, so the project, as far as I'm concerned, is code compliant, has been reviewed, and has the attention of historic preservation, the approval of historic preservation. That leaves us, unless any of the commissioners see something I haven't seen, move to approve.
Second. Or not take DR.
That's correct. Thank you for the correction.
Commissioners, there is a motion to not take DR and approve the project as proposed. On that motion, Commissioner Antonini.
Aye.
Commissioner Borden.
Aye.
Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
Commissioner Sugaya.
Aye.
Commission President Wu.
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously, 5-0. For the benefit of the public, item 16 at 437 Duncan Street has been continued to July 24, 2014. Commissioners, that will place us on general public comment.
Is there any general public comment? Seeing none, public comment closed, meeting adjourned.
That's a record. Almost a record.